Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Scousers Premier League show. We are one guy less this week. It's me hosting, as always, Timucin, right here in Chicago. With me is Gally. Gally, what's happening?
Not too much. Doing fine up here in good old Massachusetts. Rainy, cold, but we need that rain, so I'll take it.
Well, we don't have Bickler this week, probably because maybe Bickler got postponed as well. With all these games being postponed, Bickler is postponed as well. So it's just us two. So I figured this week we will kind of like go through maybe a bit more quickly. Normally we don't go game by game because just too many games. Not this week with all the postponements. So I figured we will kind of like go through game real quick and take a look at the scores and give our takes on what we think it means in the grand scheme of things. So we'll start with Friday. We were blessed with Friday games, probably because we were cursed with no weekend games coming up for a couple of weeks. But Villa, Southampton, Gerrard wins a crucial 3 points. What do you make of that one?
It was an important 3 points. I don't think it, and albeit for me, right, to come out and say something positive about Villa. Well, that's not going to happen. I don't think it was a vintage performance. I don't think it was anything that he's going to write home about, but it's something for them to build upon. Yeah. They needed those points. They were getting into a tough spot of just too many matches without picking up points. So, I'm still struggling with the fact that how Ramsey wasn't offside on that goal. VAR has apologized today and basically said he was offside. So maybe we'll get to VAR. So again, I feel like it's kind of a mixed bag for Villa. Even when they get 3 points, I feel like you can be critical of how they're getting to that. And I still think they have a long way to go before they start to really feel good that they've started to really build something, because I still don't feel like they have an identity.
Yeah, I think they're still trying to almost like work in the new pieces. It's almost like, man, we got too many new pieces, kind of an ordeal. We're trying to make something happen. And we talked about it before the season, and we got a lot of slack for it over here in YouTube. That, the inconsistency that Gerrard had in the first season. It's going to be interesting to see. While it was not too impressive, it was regardless 3 points. When you only muster 4 from the first 6, you don't care how it comes. You take the 3 points and run with it. So I think, at the end of the season, they might look back at that game and say, that's the game that kept us up. You never know. So I'm sure Villa fans will take it.
And my one takeaway from the match, though, of seeing the highlights and watching a little bit of it Friday afternoon, Jacob Ramsey is a player.
Yes.
Like, there's a player in there, and he's only getting better and better. And that kid has, I know everyone wants him to say, oh, he's being groomed to come to Liverpool because, 1, we need midfielders, and 2, Gerrard's his manager. That kid could basically someday play for any of the top sides in England, whoever they happen to be at the time. And honestly, his game actually looks like it's one of the few English players that could translate out of the league.
Yeah,
England's got a really, really special player on their hands. We all talk about Bellingham and all these guys. There's another really good young English midfielder, and he's playing at Villa. So
don't worry.
That was my takeaway.
Southgate will, I'm sure, take good care of him. Don't you worry about it.
I'm sure he'll make him either a defensive midfielder or play him at wing back.
So next up on Sunday is Nottingham Forest losing to Fulham at home after being up. Fulham comes back, wins that one. Fulham is looking more and more like they're here to stay. We had doubts on them in the beginning, but how worried should Nottingham Forest fans be? I know they signed 92 players and it takes time to kind of like gel and stuff, but perhaps that was a mistake that was made, bringing in so many guys so late. I guess in some ways, one thing that's going for them is probably the World Cup, just because it will give them time and maybe they will come in the second half a more composed team and start racking up some points. But you got to be worried about their record so far.
Yeah, if I'm Forrest, I'm worried. I'm not just worried that I don't know all the players' numbers and names because, well, how could anyone remember that many new things at once? I'm worried that in addition to all the new signings and the betting in process, that they just don't look up to it, even defending a lead at home. And that's worrisome to me. When they had that first home match and they were just ruckus and it was craziness, you said to yourself, like, hey, if they can get this type of atmosphere every time at that stadium, then maybe they can do just enough to hang on. Like, no one was picking them to be a top half of the table team. Like, no one thought they were the first year Wolves came up and they just made a run at Europe. And we were like, how does this happen? Well, they had won the championship the year before, and the year before that, they had played right up to the end of the season in third place and got knocked out in the playoff. So Wolves was building something. Forest got lightning in a bottle second half of last season, then sold off every player that got them promotion.
Yeah.
And then bought every player all around Europe. They didn't just buy English players either. They bought everyone from anywhere. So it's, I worry for them. The one thing, and I think we'll get to it as we talk about the other 5 matches, there are some really, really, really poor sides right now, including teams that we thought would be better. And
but I think,
that
we'll
may
talk
give them
about
a shot.
like you're saying, we're going to get to those probably next up here. But I feel one thing those teams will have that Forest will not, and you can take this as a positive or a negative, is Premier League experience overall in the squad.
Absolutely.
Like a majority of them. And I think that's something Forest is not going to have, because like you're saying, they brought people from all over the place. They're like, hey, you number 26, come on over here. And that, like just got all these guys. And like you say, the World Cup could be a blessing. I don't know if their manager will have that time. We'll see how October goes. I mean, this is going to be an important stretch for them, I think, to see how it goes. But World Cup is a good opportunity for them, I think, to see at least if they can put all those pieces together. Next up, first thing in the morning, Saturday, I admit I didn't wake up for it because as a Liverpool fan, we probably were hoping, hey, Wolves at least defends well. But, 50 seconds into the game, that pretty much went down the drain. And with an early lead, City kind of make that look like an easy game to get out of the way. What do you think about Wolves? Is that one of the teams that you're like, hey, man, this is trouble? They did get one of my most hated guys of all time in Diego Costa.
It's amazing. Before you know it, you're going to have all of your most hated players in the league at once. They'll all be
Neymar when you need him.
Yeah, they'll all be Brazilian, regardless of what country they identify and represent in European competition. But I do love that. You tell us all the time how much you love watching Brazil play, and then you hate every Brazilian player that comes to England. I love it. But the way I looked at Wolves, well, the dog got up at like 4:30 in the morning Eastern time, which was enough for me to shoot myself in the face. So I decided, well, I'm up, I might as well do some work. I literally realized it was 7:33, and I was like, I've been working for 2 hours. I can shut this off, go down and watch the game. But before I did, I checked the score and saw it was already 1-0. Thought to myself, I'll put it on the radio and I'll go ahead and get 2 more hours worth of work done. Listen, City's a machine. They're flying. Let's not spend much time on them. We're going to talk a lot about them as Liverpool supporters, I think, the rest of the way. KDB, Haaland, even Grealish looked good this weekend. He was really good against Wolves. I watched the highlights. I was impressed. They have everything working for them. But Wolves is the story here. They are a shell of themselves. The manager looks absolutely lost. Nuno lost his job because he moved from a back 3 to a back 4 and it didn't work out. Bruno Lage is basically playing a back 4 and sold every defender that Nuno had that was good to move to this back 4. And to be fair, the Collins kid has been outstanding since his big money move, but that red card has to be one of the dumbest and worst red cards you'll ever see. You know what's going on. It's a straight red all day long.
Yeah, it is.
And the moment it happened, you could see the sheer disappointment in his face because he knew there was really no argument. He tried. He hoped VAR would, do a VAR thing and make a huge blunder out of something and keep him on the pitch, but it didn't work. So I think Wolves are in real trouble. I think Wolves are in a break glass, hire Frank Allardyce type mode soon. I'm not kidding, because I think this team needs a new manager, and I don't know that Bruno Lage is going to do it. And clearly, I don't know that Sam Allardyce speaks enough Portuguese to take this job.
I was gonna say that's the only issue there. I mean, when you look at like the standings, and we're gonna talk about West Ham in a little bit as well. 3 goals scored in 7 games, and we talked about this in the preseason, right? It's gonna be a team that's going to struggle to find goals. I did not expect it to be this bad. I mean, 3 goals in 7 games is pretty dismal. I mean, to be fair to them, they have not defended poorly.
Nope.
But when you don't score, I mean, you can only get so many 0-0 ties, and that has to be a concern for them. And some of the, well, when you only score 3 goals, I guess you can remember pretty much. I can remember definitely 2 of their goals, and I'm not a Wolves fan. So it's like that says a lot right there, I think. But yeah, it's a team that's going to struggle, and I'm going to find it very hard to root for them with freaking Diego Costa over there. That is funny you mentioned that a lot of the players I despise do end up being Brazilian, but it has nothing to do with it for some reason. It's just been, I mean, I've grown up loving watching them play just because if you ever watch Brazil, like the national team, when they do certain things, especially as like somebody who plays the game, they'll bring a ball down with side of the foot or something like that, and they'll make it look so freaking easy, like it's nothing. You see that in Liverpool with like Thiago does some things on the field. Bobby does some things. As a Liverpool fan, we see those, but it's like, 11 Bobbies out there. So it's always been like fun to watch them. But man, they got some personalities like Neymar at the top of the list, whiny face Jesus right behind. Diego Costa, I'm going to have to put above whiny face Jesus, actually. Richarlison is up there. Be probably 2 or it's a lot. It's a lot.
I think what's happening here is Jesus is being slowly knocked down the line, and it's partially because really you hate him for his face. Because when you watch him on a pitch, when you watch him play football, he plays the way you like center forwards to play.
Yeah.
He's always on the ball. We'll get to Arsenal and talk, and we'll glow about him. We don't need to say anything else nice about him. I just always find it funny because every time you do that, you're like, and Jesus, and then before you know it, you name 4 more players you despise more. Before you know it, it'll be the whole Brazilian national team, including those youth kids we're being linked with.
He is falling down in the rankings. Another year, I might be wearing his jersey. You never know. Next up, we got Newcastle, Bournemouth. I was actually shocked to see Bournemouth, I think, get a golden point out of Newcastle. Tough place to play. I mean, I thought it was a golden point they got out of there. What do you make of that? And what does it say about Newcastle?
So, before we get to the last match of the week, if that last match of the week hadn't happened, this would have been my shock result that Bournemouth got a point here, especially at Newcastle. It's not like they pulled one out at home. To be fair on Bournemouth, and once again, raise my hand in the non-Bournemouth fan club. I am not only a member, also the president. Yeah, they've gotten 3 points since firing. They've gotten 3 points out of 3 matches since firing Scott Parker and the drubbing at Liverpool. So I think Bournemouth has to feel pretty good about themselves. The idea that they've gotten 3 draws and a win this season, that's 6 more points than I actually thought they would get before Christmas. So I just really feel like they have to feel like they're building on something. The Philip Billings goal was really impressive, and I think there's a player inside of him, and I think they need to do more of him and Solanke playing off each other up top. The Kiefer Moore experiment that Scott Parker was trying to do, the direct Route 1 football, it's not going to work in the Premier League. So I actually, on the other hand, I don't want to kill Newcastle because they conceded a second half goal. They only gave up 1. They're still one of the best defensive sides in the league. It's still, they have only lost 1 match all year, and that was that match to us. So I think Newcastle's in with a shout of being one of the teams. Now, 5 draws isn't going to make you overly excited, right?
Yeah.
But it's a hell of a lot better than last year at this time when they had 1 win and 6 losses, right?
And if you think about it, they've had some tough games. They played us, they played City. I mean, it's been a tough schedule for them. And I almost feel like, though, you look at the Newcastle team that played against City, that played against Liverpool, that same attitude should still crush Bournemouth. I feel like as a team, they feel like they belong up there. And I think that makes them get up, if you will, for some of those games a lot more than perhaps against a team like Bournemouth.
I'd agree with that. The other thing I would say is the keeper that came in, Neto, for Bournemouth, the former Barcelona backup that they bought. He basically stood on his head. He made 6 saves throughout the match. He made 2 world-class saves that stopped Isak. Almiron should have scored with a great bit of skill. So they were a little unlucky on the day. I also think they took 650 corners, which on another day you'd expect one of those to go in. But once again, VAR's reaping its ugly head, popping in, making mistakes, and coming out today and apologizing, basically stating that there should have been, I think it was a penalty. So Newcastle might be able to say to themselves, Bournemouth was great. The keeper stood on his head. And the referees were betting against us and playing against us. And don't let it be anything that a Magpies fan wouldn't do, like blame an official or a match day squad for exactly why they didn't get results. Because if there's one thing they like to do up there at St. James's Park is rally around the hatred for everybody that isn't Newcastle.
And I think, like I say, it's not definitely like a poor result or anything to concern yourself with in terms of when you look at like the scores. I just felt like that would have been a game that's probably should have been an easy, on paper at least, it should have been an easy 3 points for them. And I'm sure when they looked at the schedule, they did not, they put that as 3 points in their heads at home to Bournemouth. You might say, okay, losing to Liverpool, I mean, they almost pulled off a point there, obviously in the last second. But there's no shame in that. But losing points at home to Bournemouth is going to hold you back from going to Europe next year. That's one of those deals. But like we said earlier, they have had a tough schedule. But Bournemouth, on the other hand, you would think Bournemouth, having conceded 9 goals in one game, would have a brutal defense and would by far be the worst defense in the league. But enter Brendan Rodgers to save the day, where they lose 6-2 to Leicester. I think Son just scored again. So what do you make of that whole ordeal? I was, when we were doing the morning show this morning, I was literally looking for the headline for Rodgers, but he's still hanging in there. And I know he's been dealt a bad hand in terms of how that roster was formed at the end. They lost some crucial players out of there with no even, possible replacements. But 22 goals conceded in 7 games is pretty brutal.
Yeah, I struggle with this one because I like dumping on Brendan as much as anyone. It's fun, it's stick, it's fodder. He has been dealt a bad hand. I mean, I think when you lose the club captain, who's also been a keeper for 12 seasons, literally with a week to go in the window, it basically says everything you need to know about the club. Like, not only did the player leave for Nice, not like some
Barcelona,
right, or even Roma, or even something in the Mickey Mouse Europa Conference Cup. Like, he left for Nice, like a lower level French team, and that to me, and Kasper Schmeichel's been nothing but an excellent servant of that club. So to me, that speaks that there's bigger issues at that club. When your club captain is willing to walk away with a week to go, knowing the only thing is in replacement is a career backup. They had no youth. They don't even have a young keeper to give a shot to, because Ward has been terrible. A lot of these goals, some of these goals are on the keeper. He has been just absolutely poor. His organization's been bad. And then on top of it, he has Brendan Rodgers tactically putting him in position to organize people. So that's, right there. The amount of goals they're conceding off set pieces, absolutely ridiculous.
That's a Brendan Rodgers classic, though.
Yeah. Before we get to Tottenham, I do think it is worth noting. Maddison does look like the only player who actually cares right now and is giving any effort on both sides of the ball for Leicester. And I don't know if that's because he thinks that might get him his move out in January to a Newcastle or even to a Tottenham, a bigger club. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Maddison, because for me, he looks back to the top of his game. We talked about our good friend Garrett Southgate, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. If he considers Madison, he really doesn't like Madison's skill sets in the English setup. He's never given him a shot. But for me, that's a talent you just don't leave behind. But we'll see what he does. So that was the one bright spot for me. Rodgers is struggling when he's basically benched Vardy to start Daka. Daka started 3 straight matches with a healthy Jamie Vardy. And I think that's partially because he knows that maybe kickstarting Daka might be something to kickstart this squad. But Vardy looks a little bit of a shell of himself, even when he comes in for the late substitute appearances. So nothing looks like it's working, and I'm not sure it's going to. I think Leicester could be in real, real trouble if they don't get this straightened out. Like, they could be in this battle all year long, and they could end up going down.
I mean, they're not even close right now, man. It's kind of rough. And here's the thing, you look at the squad, it might be a team as unfair as Rodgers it would be in some ways, because I know because of financial situations they had to sell some of these guys, right? But they got a ton of money for them, and some of them could have been reinvested if they didn't wait till the last second to do the Fofana deal, for example. And I think Schmeichel leaving is a huge part of the deal, but I think you're right. I think it signals other problems for him to be like, I got to get out of here. I don't care where. Kind of an ordeal for a guy like that who's had a good career and really is a good goalie. And obviously, with his dad and stuff like that, you would think, I think just the place that he went to, anywhere but here, kind of an attitude is scary for what's going on behind the scenes, perhaps that we do not see. So you're right. A few words on Tottenham. What do you say?
I mean, my words on Tottenham are this. I wasn't shocked to see Richarlison in the starting lineup. I've been making that call on the fantasy shows and mentioning in our Discord channel that I could see that happening because he has played really well and he has impacted them positively as a sub. Was I a little shocked to see him get the start over Son? I was, but Son has been poor. Not just bad, he's been really poor. Even his underlying stats almost looked like he was off the pace and off the ball. I guess that's what you do, right? Maybe we need to give like Mo a start from the bench, because if that's what a world-class player gets when you make him come in the 70th minute and he literally comes in, because he got a hat trick, he should have scored another goal and he should have had 2 assists. I mean, he missed Harry Kane twice on plays. So that to me is more concerning about Leicester. It's one thing to give up a couple late goals and like lose a big match or lose something as a heartache, right? When you start conceding goals and then you just need to shore it up and you give up a hat trick to a sub because you just stopped defending. I mean, it's not like they were going all out to get the equalizer or to score 2 road goals or something. So they gave up. I mean, they just weren't defending like it didn't matter. And like he was, some 15-year-old kid named Son, not, arguably the best player in the Premier League. And, that's where Son is at this point. He's at the level of Salah and De Bruyne. I mean, he's earned it now over 3-4 years. He's Spurs' best player by a landslide for me when he's on his game. But I will say this, it is scary for everyone in this league because when Harry Kane's creating and scoring goals, Spurs are really, really tough to beat. And Kane was, once again, really, really good in that match. He might have only got 1 goal, but he did everything right all match long.
Yeah, see, that's one of those things where I don't know who should get more credits. Do you give the credit to, Spurs and their attack? Because there are like a lot of good pieces in there. Or do you give it to Rodgers defending or Leicester's defending and the fact that the shoulders dropped, heads dropped, and they just basically gave up? And when you give up and you have a play against a player like Son, he's gonna just run all over you. I mean, the defending, I feel like, we were talking about earlier about some of the players in terms of who looks like they still care. I think there are a lot of quality players on that Leicester team who, if things are happening, they're at it, but then they're like, it's just not happening. Maybe not today, kind of thing. Like, like Tielemans and so, or like even like Barnes and stuff like that. They're like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, what are you gonna do? Kind of an attitude you see, and that's why I don't know, as unfair as it will be on Rodgers, I don't know if manager change would change that, just a new voice in like the locker room and stuff like that. 2 games left. Brentford, Arsenal. Arsenal get back on track. 3 goals, 3 points. I mean, thoroughly deserved. It reminded me a little bit of the Crystal Palace game that they won in the, I think that was the first week, right? Kind of like it just was not even close in terms of when you looked at the teams on the field, who was the better team and who deserved to win.
Yeah, what a difference from last year's opening day fixture at Brentford, where Arsenal just looked abysmal and they lose 2-0, and you're like, what is going on? A promoted team playing their first Premier League match is beating Arsenal like it's nothing, like a drum. And we got the exact opposite on Sunday morning. Really, really impressed once again, with Arsenal and their overall setup. I got to raise my hand. I've been very critical of Arteta, and I'm going to stick with the critical nature that I think at times his antics and the way he he looks like he's literally going to kick every ball, and sometimes he does. I think that weighs into his team when they play big sides in big moments, and at times it's not what's best for him. And I think it's like one of those things that like all managers learn, that your emotions can be great for your team, but they can also hurt your side. And I think Klopp knows how to balance that. And I think even Pep knows how to balance that. Jose was a master at balancing that on the sidelines. I'm not sure Arteta knows how to do that yet.
Yeah.
But clearly his players love him, and they will go through a wall for him. What he's got going on with Jesus, Saka, and Martinelli up top is really special. The fact that Odegaard was missing, who I'd maybe argue has been their best player top to bottom all season, that he was missing from that match, and Vieira makes his debut, and it's like they missed nothing. Vieira was great. The goal was class. I mean, it's just a class goal. You can see why they love the little diminutive guy, but then 2 seconds later, like someone breathed on him and he hit the 4th row. So you can also see why guys like Paul were like, why would anyone pay 34 million for a guy smaller than Galley? But I just think that Arsenal is really, really classy right now. And the thing that just keeps going under the radar is their defense is outstanding. Ramsdale's good in net, and Saliba and Gabriel look like a class partnership at the heart of defense, who can help you on set pieces going forward. They have the look of a side that's making it into the top 4. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it was going to be for me. It was going to be interesting to see whatever Arteta is doing is obviously working. I think this was a good test, only because it was interesting to see what happens after losing to United and getting that kind of like your image rocked a little bit. Your first like tough game perhaps, and like big fixture, and you lose it. How that team would rebound was important to see. I think that's a good point you bring. I think they still had that bad taste from last year that they wanted to get out. So that's like an additional incentive to play better at Brentford. But yeah, I mean, it reminded me of the Crystal Palace game, like I said, as I was looking at it, where it's like, well, like it's dominance. They know what they're doing, and it looked like a well-deserved and in some ways semi-easy 3 points, where that's hard to say in the Premier League, especially when you're away. So you got to give him credit for that. Last
Absolutely.
game, and I was probably out of the weekend, the game I ended up watching a huge portion of it. Then I went to see if I had some paint so I can just throw it on a wall and watch that instead, because it might slightly be better watching that dry. These are 2 poor teams. Everton looked a lot livelier, and that's one thing I think they have going. Obviously, being home helps. But man, West Ham, that's another team we were talking about earlier in terms of, lack of goals. 3 goals scored in 7 games with all that talent out there. Almost seems like they must be going out of their way not to score.
Yeah, I mean, their best player, if their best player is still Jared Bowen, like I feel like at this point, like there's like an imposter and they're gonna rip his face off. It's gonna be like Scooby-Doo style, and it's gonna be Fred. And he's just gonna be like, I look like Jared Bowen. Or it's Patrick Bamford, and he's like under a bridge going, Leeds won't play me. But
you're lucky Bickler's in here talking smack about Bamford.
Yeah,
like that.
I know. And Bowen in the same sentence. But he's just looked so off of it, and what a terrible time for that to happen as he's going into, these big matches leading up to the World Cup that I'm sure he wants to be a part of. The way I look at it, it's not. If you had asked us if we did our normal show, this was going to be my shock of the week, and my dud of the week was actually going to be David Moyes, because we can bang on Rodgers, we can bang on whoever we want. West Ham spent over $100 million in the market.
Yeah,
they bought him a striker. They bought him they bought him two strikers, a creative midfielder, and a frontline defender. And they upgraded his keeper, but he doesn't have the stones to go to the backup in Areola. He's staying with Fabianski, even though Fabianski has made mistakes. So that's classic Moyes, right? Like, stick with the guys who got me here. I'm going to play Antonio till he runs into the ground. And then I go to the Italian kid for one start. He has a poor 45 minutes. I yank him at halftime. It's just classic Moyes, like back to the well. And to be fair to Everton, they did look much better, and it was all up the middle. They went and made huge additions, right? They got Cody, and they brought in Tarkowski. It's showing now that they have a better center back pairing than they've had in the past few years.
Yeah.
They brought in Idrissa Gueye, their former player. He's a huge improvement as a holding midfielder on anything they had. And this Anana kid looks like an actual solid player, the box-to-box midfielder they bought, the number 8. So you add those guys in, and you put that little disgusting little bastard Neil Maupay up top, and you know what you get with him. You get a guy who will dig his fingernails under your skin on a corner. He'll kick you in the shins. He'll, call your mom names, but he'll also pop up and score a goal. And that's because he gets under people's skin, and he's an improvement right now on anything that they had. So, if I'm Everton right now, as awkward as it is where they are on the table, I think the last couple performances they had between the draw against us and these 3 points, you got to feel good about picking up those 4 out of 6 and feeling like you may be ticking towards not being where you want to be, but being where you can't be, which is in the bottom 5 come the end of the season.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's a team that still struggles to score, but then they have defended a lot better. It's a team that's harder to score on. I think that kind of goes hand in hand too, but they do have some good players to at least to be able to play that style where they can, kind of like dig in there and see if Maupay or somebody like Gray has a miracle shot cutting in from the wing or something like that and make something happen, or Gordon, and like ride it out. So I think what they have doing now is we'll go for the 0-0. If we nick one, it's good, which is what they did. Against Liverpool, they didn't, so it was 0-0. It's still points, and I think that's one thing maybe Lampard learned last year is a point is a point sometimes, and those all add up.
And if they get back, I hate to say it, but if they get Dominic Calvert-Lewin back at some point to some level of form that he was at before these injuries started niggling, you could argue that Lampard has never had the best player at the club the entire time he's been the manager. So we really don't know what his tactics or what that team will look like if and when Dominic Calvert-Lewin gets back on the pitch and is playing at any semblance of what he was prior. And I'm not a huge fan, but he is a clear upgrade on everything they've been trotting out there and rotting out there with, in my opinion. He's better than Maupay. He's clearly better than the round mound that is Solomon Rondon and his 750 pounds he brings with him on the pitch. So I do believe that we've never even seen Gray really play with the target man. You've never really these are opportunities I think that could make them much better.
Yes, and I think Calvert-Lewin brings that as well. So if you still play that, like the defensive outlook overall, now that's one more guy that can kind of like get you a goal, sometimes out of nowhere, even a half-ass cross. Sometimes he can convert, but then in form one, not the out of form modeling version. So it depends on which one they're going to get in return. So it's going to be interesting to see, but more than that, it will be interesting to see if West Ham, I think they almost have too much quality to be able to pull themselves out. I don't think, like, I don't still see them as a relegation threat. But then again, I didn't see them being like bottom 3 7 weeks in either. So who knows? I mean, you say that for a while, and then by the time, if you're still in that same vicinity in like 10 weeks, you're like, you make it into reality by just talking about it.
I'd be worried about. I'd actually be worried if I were David Moyes at some point. I know they had the great run last year, and they can have all the nicknames, the Moisaya and all this. But if we've seen anything, right, those supporters, that stadium, that ground, they can turn on their own really, really quick. And I don't think the American money that's invested in that club is going to allow for them to toil when they were playing Barcelona in the Europa League last year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they turn around and what that does, and I think how like Europe affects and everything like that. But yeah, it's a huge 3 points still for Everton.
Yep.
I think at this stage, especially like the moment they're in, those 3 points in a game like that is huge moving forward because they have a lot of tough games coming in. So it was kind of like crucial to get 3 out of this as they head into playing like the Manchester teams and stuff like that. So. Well, that's it for us this week. Next week, we don't have anything, so we don't have an episode. But the week after, we got a lot happening. So because we're giving you guys a week away from us, we will punish you twice as hard the week after. And we're going to have actually 2 matches of the week, both derby games with Arsenal Tottenham on Saturday. And then Sunday will be the City versus United, the Manchester derby. So huge games this weekend. We will cover both those games in depth. In fact, we will actually have a live watch along for the Manchester derby on Sunday right here on American Scouser TV. So I guess enjoy the national games or whatever, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a good day, everybody.